every advantage I found. Couldn't find a better fit for them, along with my crown. And since the baton was passed, I've been down. Cause failing's not an option, and dad is not a noun, not at all.
My message to any dad, man, first off, know that, yeah, it is a hard job, but it's the greatest job in the world. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I wouldn't change anything about it. Everything you're doing from here on out, if it didn't have purpose before, now it has purpose. It's the most important thing you'll ever do. Just be a dad.
Welcome to another episode of Dad is Not a Now. My name is Ishmael, changing the narrative for men of color and fatherhood, as well as changing the narrative on the things I care about. And today, we're going to talk about the election. Biden out, Kamala's in, and we're going to just go into this deep rabbit hole about the election, how it's changed, how it impacts today, and then also put a little historical stamp on the conversation. And I'm truly honored to have this amazing brother on. He's been on this podcast before. He is a devoted husband. He's a father of two beautiful daughters. He's a history teacher down in Atlanta. He lived in New York. He lived in New York, but let me rephrase it. He's not in Atlanta. He's in a part of Georgia. Loganville, Georgia. He's a history teacher now in Georgia, as well as he's the founder and the CEO of Serious Pen Publishing. And he has a great series called Shadowrunner.
Freedom Runner.
Let me get it right.
Don't
worry about it. I'm going to rewind. He is the founder and CEO of Serious Pen Publishing. Freedom Runner is an amazing series. I would say this series is like the PG-13 of Assassin's Creed. And if you like Assassin's Creed, when you talk about implementing history into the story to make you engage about history, then you're gonna love Freedom Runner. And I got Paul Dornan with me, brother. Thank you for coming on, brother.
Thank you for having me. And I would definitely say the series is T17. It'll be rated R history just in a really articulate way. And so 7th grade and up. And we got high schools, middle schools, and college professors working with the book now. And we're working on getting it into school systems, specifically in New York, but all across the country. So we're going to keep pushing.
Definitely. But before we get to our topic, but just talk about Freedom Runner, how you merge, history into just to get people excited about learning about history.
So first and foremost, like I tell my students all the time, sex, murder, money, rock and roll. That is history right there, right? And when I bring history into the classroom, we always take it from two facets. The first facet that my students love, history is about perspective.
Right.
Depending on where you were sitting when that shot is fired, depending on what time you walked into the room before that body dropped, you have a different and unique perspective, right? That doesn't mean there aren't concrete facts, right? And so from a teacher to student to historical perspective historian, we look at multiple perspectives so we can get the bigger picture. But we also recognize that we may never get the bigger picture because there's certain pieces of the puzzle that are missing, right? And small example of that is Lincoln's assassination. We have the shooter, Booth. We have Lincoln dead. You have a auditorium full of people. When they catch him, they have a diary with pages missing. So we have a part of history that's missing. We don't know all the key players, right? We can assume that he was killed because of Southern sympathizers, but it doesn't mean that there weren't Northerners who wanted him dead either, right? And so that's history in a nutshell from one facet. And then the second facet is, I always remind my students, we are talking about people, no matter where they are, what language they speak, they do what you would have done. Somebody in the room is a fighter. So when your back is to the wall, you fight. Somebody in the room is a runner. You don't care what happens. You are not fighting. You are running. Some of you don't know whether you're a runner or a fighter. And when the pressure mounts, you figure out who is who, right? That's history. And then when we talk about the sex, money, murder, and rock and roll, that's history, right? We've fought over lovers, quarrels. We fight over money. We fight over religion, and we fight over rock and roll simply because some of us just want to party. That is history, and that hasn't changed. And that's what really draws kids into the class and what we cover in general. And it's also what people try to shy away from. And I think the biggest mistake that we make, particularly with politicians today, is we're fighting so hard to take away parts of history. You go, no, just because we talk about it, just because we have conversations, you shouldn't feel alienated. You shouldn't feel bad because you wasn't there. Why is a white woman, a white man in Colorado or Tennessee supposed to feel bad for something that happened 100 years ago? Your ass wasn't there when your great-great-grandfather did it. And again, you still shouldn't feel bad. He's like, well, my great-grandfather owned slaves and therefore we had money, and you still shouldn't feel bad because that had nothing to do with you, right? And so this idea that you're trying to alienate people, make people like, no, we're talking about something that happened in the past. We're trying to shed light on why we have institutions the way they are today. And that conversation is needed more than ever because we are still feeling the effects. The American public is now just baffled and befuddled with our election system because of something that's being used that's so antiquated. Like, we don't have slave states anymore. So why do we still have two houses in Congress? Like, who are we trying to, well, smaller states. Well, every election in the country, with the exception of the president, is based on majority vote. If you win by 3 votes, you win. And the president has an electoral college. Why? Because slavery. And so this antiquated system, you go, well, it's an easy fix. Get rid of the electoral college and just have a flat out vote. You do it with other elections. Why are we scared to do it with the presidential? Unless one party is scared that they would never see the White House again.
And I
Then,
think,
right?
yeah, no. And I think it's important too. It's like when you look at statistics, if you look at 2045, is that the majority of people in 2045 will be brown and black people.
But let me see. I
Go
got to fire a shot at that.
ahead, bro. Go ahead, bro.
A couple years ago, the census changed. It used to be black, white, Native American, Alaskan, that whole thing, and then they added black, white, Hispanic, Latino, subcategory Hispanic and Latino, black or white, right? So you now have a lot of Hispanic and Latino people that are identifying as white. If you look at Florida,
Yes,
there's an enormous amount of Cuban people that will check off white in the box, right? Because in Hispanic and Latino household, being dark skinned is bad, right? Because in America, the race relations we have, nobody wants to be black. Like, people want to be black, but nobody actually want to be black, right? And so,
go ahead, bro.
And so in the next, and by the time we get to 2045, we're gonna have all these people who identify as white because it serves a purpose. And we also can't be completely baffled if we look at state legislators across the board. Yeah, we have black people and Hispanic and Latino and our first Muslim and our first women and this whole smorgasbord of people. Yeah, let's not be confused who's really still in power, right?
No, and you make a valid point, and I want to bring up too, because when you go back to the early days of America, I go back to the 1790 Neutralization Act, right? And then that act that defined citizens of this United States to be white, and kind of black people, kind of. I'm just putting it kind of. I'm putting the exclamation part, kind of.
Yeah. I
And
got you. I got
so
you.
this was the law of the land for a long time, and you had other ethnic groups who tried to identify themselves as
Mm-hmm.
Caucasian to be citizenship, and then you had different courts in the Supreme Court that said, we if you're not white, then you're not a citizen of the United States. And so you have that historical lineage, like you were talking about, of identify yourself as being white to be citizens of the United States.
And you go all the way to 1846, 1857, Dred Scott case, right?
Mm-hmm.
Same thing where Dred Scott is suing for his freedom. The Supreme Court has to stall because they need to figure out a way to keep the North happy and
Mm-hmm.
keep the slaveholders happy, because they can't rule them free, because then the South is going to have their heads,
Yes.
right? And they can't rule them a slave because the North is like watching them very closely, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so what do? They go, we got it. We can't even hear your case, they tell him,
Mm-hmm.
because you are not a citizen. And I tell my students this: when they make that ruling, they indirectly tell the North, in order for you to have any rights in this country, you have to be a citizen. Then you go, oh man, wait, what does it mean to be a citizen? Because at that time, there was no definition of being a citizen in this country, right? Because you had Irish immigrants, you had Jewish immigrants, you had immigrants from all over. There was no U.S. citizen, right? And so it became, well, what does it mean? We need to define what a citizen is. This foreshadowing for the Civil War and etc., 13, 14, the 15th Amendment, we go, oh, you have to be born here to be a citizen, which then encompasses those 4 million plus former slaves, right? We got you now. Legality was what we needed. And today it's so important. So important. We have so many people with microphones who lie.
Yes.
We have so many people who misconstrue and take things out of context. And then they take something out of context, they shove it out in the media, they abuse it, and then when it's time for them to actually say the truth, they spent 6 months spreading this lie, countless hours, and then when it's time for the truth takes 30 seconds, and they say it really low behind the microphone, and then they go back on something else, and you go, that's not what we need. That's so divisive.
So
And then we are at the point in society where someone who says I'm a Democrat and someone who says I'm a Republican can't even sit down no more.
yeah.
You can't even have dinner in the same house. They go, don't talk politics. Well, the only person who's going to tell me not to talk politics is somebody who's racist.
Facts.
Right? But then at the same time, you go, I don't want to talk politics with somebody who can't tell me something good or bad about their candidate. Right? And I tell people this all the time. I don't care how much you hate Obama, love Obama, hate Biden, love Biden, hate Harris, love Harris, hate Trump or love Trump. As an American citizen, as a conscientious objector, if you can't tell me anything good, like I'll tell this to somebody. Somebody's like, well, I hate Donald Trump. And I go, Donald Trump did have good points when he was in office. He wasn't a total mess, right?
Mm-hmm.
I go, his refocusing of the military on bringing us back to national stage and power. That was a great refocus.
Mm-hmm.
You may disagree with the way he did it,
Right.
but repositioning us because we need to stick our chest out towards Russia and China.
Right.
Right? That was a phenomenal move. I disagree with how he went about it.
Right.
But it was a phenomenal move. Trying to withdraw from NATO, that's probably one of the stupidest things I could possibly think of. Because why in the hell? First off, the system of NATO in and of itself protects America from nuclear missile attacks.
Right.
Because if a missile is being launched, it's going to come from China, it's going to come from Russia. It's going to start in Europe, and then it's going to come over here.
Right.
Having a defense system in Europe, having a defense system in the Atlantic and Pacific, having a defense system with a nation of allies that can shoot thousands of missiles to shoot them out of the air. Yeah, pulling us out from that is probably one of the stupidest things I can think of. But he did do something good, right? And so for me, when it comes down to politics, I'm like, we need to be honest about our candidates. And the biggest thing is we need to know what they can and cannot do. That is the fundamental issue. When a politician gets up there and says, I'm going to make Mexico pay for a border, you're the president of the United States, not the president of Mexico. Right? And so that's weird to me. I go, that is not one of the 5 powers of the president of the United States. And go ahead.
No, go ahead, bro. No, because I think it's important too, because it goes back to understanding how government works. And I think in this age that we live in, I think I want to say majority of people, but I just think some people don't know how government works. And, you have 3 branches of government, and, they all have their functionality and things like that.
I got to correct you. We had,
but I'm just saying we had. But
we have 2 now.
Now we have 2.
Actually, no, we now have 1. It's the executive branch.
Yes.
The Supreme Court's decision.
Yes.
For presidential immunity, we now have 1 branch.
Right. And then if you go back to the other thing that Supreme Court did was Chevron basically giving the power back to the executive branch, making, the one thing they pushed was the overreaching of the administration branch, because that was supposedly the 4th branch of government. And when people think about what's the 4th branch of government, these are the EPA, OSHA. These are things that we take for granted that were implemented because a lot of people died. And so a lot of those legislation that was put in place to protect people, these legislation was penned by blood. So a lot of people died for the things we take for granted. Go ahead, bro.
And so let's look at 2 very important places where we see why the president and the branches are the way that they are. Let's start with Little Rock, Arkansas, desegregation. So we go back to 1957. We have desegregation. Eisenhower has to send the military to Arkansas because the governor does not want to listen to the Supreme Court. Right? If Eisenhower allows the governor to do as he pleases, that means we have 49 other states that are like, man, whatever. Can't have it. If we don't enforce the rulings of the Supreme Court, which, by the way, is one of the powers of the president to enforce laws, then we have anarchy, right? And the same way I would explain it to my students, the fundamental reason kids don't come in and just start stabbing each other all day is because nobody want to go to jail. The reason teachers don't spaz out on a daily basis and just start slapping people's kids because people don't want to go to jail. Right? The reason most parents, some parents do this, but most parents don't come to school and start choking teachers out one by one because they don't want to go to jail. Because the expectation is if I choke you out, I will then get arrested. I will then be prosecuted. I will then go to jail. Right? But the fundamental line between them all is the law will be enforced.
And I love how you brought that up too, bro. Because I want to connect everything together. I know we're off topic. We want to talk about the president and everything, the election and everything like that. But I love how you implemented that into the conversation. Because when you talk about the different massacres that happened after Reconstruction, right? When you talk about Ocoee, when you talk about Wilmington, when you talk about Tulsa, you had laws on the books. But what happened? Those laws did not go into place. Why? Because people of color weren't looked as citizens. And because they weren't looked at citizens, they did not get the due they deserve because of those different parts of what happened after Reconstruction.
And in social studies and history, we call this the other, right? The
Yes.
them versus us. And what we have today in modern politics is them versus us. And when you create the them and you separate them, it's easier for you to attack. This is why it baffles me when I see people go online to like the libs, the libtards. Like, bro, you wasn't saying libtards in 1990. Like, no one said you're a libtard in 1990. And they're like, oh, these fucking MAGAs. And you're like, you wasn't saying that in 1990. You wasn't saying that, right? You're like, oh, these MAGA people. When you create a us versus them, it is now easier to attack. And when it's now easy to attack, it's easier to divide, right? And that's where we are as a country right now. And so when we talk about this election being significant, extremely significant, you have one side is like we're fighting for democracy, right? The other side is like, well, we're fighting for democracy. And you go, man, this sounds eerie reminiscent of you stupid ass people during the Civil War. Because we're like, we're fighting for freedom. No, we're fighting for freedom. Oh, really? Because what freedom are you fighting for? Right? And we're now at the point where forget a line being blurred, there's no lines, right? But we also are in a very tough position because politicians today have no backbone. Yeah. And again, I said it earlier and I'll say it again when we were off camera, but I'll say it again. George Washington owned more slaves than any sitting president. George Washington raped his slaves because he believed they were his property. George Washington, as fucked up as his moral compass was, this man still had the moral fortitude to say, I need people from different sides of the political aisle because I don't know everything. That's crazy, right? You have a Republican Party with Project 2025 that's saying we need to get rid of anyone who doesn't think like us. Yeah. And then you have a slave owner, president, rapist, who says, no, I need to have people from different sides of the political spectrum because I don't have all the answers. The fact that I can lean on George Washington for more common sense and a higher moral standard than a politician today is baffling. And I'm a black man. Like, that's wild.
And I'm gonna get probably trouble by saying this, but when you say that, George Washington reminds me of like R. Kelly. I know.
No, but like it's true. Like it's like
I understand he was a rapist, but I still listen to his music.
Yeah, but like it's like,
and I'm not laughing because you know it's
not. You know what? You made a very good point.
It's a great parallel.
Like and here's why that parallel is so amazing. We have one party and candidate who's literally talking about purging the government, literally purging.
Yeah.
Anyone who's not with me has to go.
Yes.
And then you have another party that's like, you're not with us. We're trying to work with you. And they're in this flux of, we're still trying to play by the old rules because we want things to work out. And I'm like the example you gave, that's like R. Kelly giving advice on how to make an elementary school really good or a middle school really good. You're like, damn, that does sound good. And you're like, but wait a minute, it's R. Kelly. You're like, he's giving me good advice though, right? And now I'm stuck because why am I even listening to R. Kelly in the first place? And why is he telling me how to make a middle school better? And why is it making sense? But it's still R. Kelly, right? And that's the conundrum that we're in because I really want to say the turning point for us as a country was Barack Obama. Yeah. I remember when he ran and I remember people crying and yada, yada, yada. And people were like, man, I can't believe I lived to see this day. And while you had members of the Black and Hispanic and Latino community, like, I can't believe we lived to see this day, you also had other members. Because remember, Jerry Jones is alive, and the kids who went to school with Jerry Jones are still alive. And the same kids who were trying to keep those kids out of Little Rock, Arkansas,
Yes.
a lot of them are still alive. And they also said, I can't believe we lived to see this day. Right. So we had two, I can't believe we lived to see this day. And then what we found was the media took a serious turn. Democrats and Republicans have always had their news stations. They've always had it.
Yes.
The one thing that they had in common was we could talk bad about the president, but we respected the office. And we could never vilify the president, because if we vilified the president up until Obama, we would have to then vilify someone that looks like our children, our sons. And we see the same phenomenon when it comes to mass shootings.
Yes.
Right? When, perfect example, Trump assassination or attempted assassination, the shooter, you see, it's the attempted assassination of a president. That should still be on the news everywhere.
Yes.
Right? His face should be all over the news everywhere.
Yes.
His face should be synonymous with the Nike swoosh and the McDonald arch. Everyone should know it. He attempted to kill the former president of the United States.
Yes.
That is no small feat.
Yeah.
And yet, most people couldn't pick him out the lineup. Yet, when they show his picture, it's a picture of him from when he was a child. Why are we trying to humanize the man who tried to kill Donald Trump?
That's a good question.
And people are saying, you know, like, well, they found pictures of other politicians. I don't care who else was in his phone. He shot at Trump.
Yeah.
And he almost killed that man. Hate him or love him, he is a father. That is somebody's son. He has people that care about him. Someone tried to kill him. And we can't identify the shooter. You could put his picture up just about anywhere in the country, and most people wouldn't know who the hell they were looking at. That's weird. And when we look at this turn, it came with Obama. And I'm reminded of what Trevor Noah said when he talked about Nelson Mandela in South Africa making his turn from apartheid.
Right.
And he said that they knew they were being mistreated because they were Black. And when they talked to their former oppressors and said, why did you mistreat us? They said, well, because you were Black. And he said, we knew it, but we just needed to hear it. And the reason that's so significant is because for America to make that turn for the better, to become that Christian nation that they rave about all the time, they got to be honest at some point.
No, and I feel you too on that point too, because I remember Harry Belafonte. I think I brought this up on a previous conversation I had. That Harry Belafonte brought up a conversation he had with Dr. King, right? You know, you had the Voting Act, right, of 1965 passed, and everybody rah rah rah. Harry Belafonte had a conversation with Dr. King. He said, "Why you not happy? You know, you got something passed, something that's gonna last for generations." And Dr. King said, "You know what? I feel that until America recognize their sins for slavery, I fear that I led my people to a burning building." And that's one thing that no one rarely talk about that Dr. King said. And I know that was from the words of Harry Belafonte, but that's important to the conversation we're having right now, is that until, you know, this country recognized the sins of slavery and the impact and the economic benefit it helped when it comes to the startup money of the United States, we will currently fall in this situation that we're in now. When you talk about race relations and when you talk about economic, what's that word I'm looking for? Economic, when it comes to people of color being even white with their white economically.
Okay. And I agree. I agree 100%. And I think it's a double-edged sword because on one hand, for some people out there, for people to not acknowledge this, it just baffles me. Race can hold you back someplace, somewhere in the United States. It absolutely can. But race can also push you forward someplace, somewhere in the United States. We as a society need to follow this very simple principle, which is treat others how you want to be treated. Right? The Bible says, love your neighbor as just love yourself. Right. And even if you're not Christian, if you're not spiritual, whatever people do these days, or pray to rocks, whatever it is that people do, it's you don't want someone to take away your right to take care of your family. So why would you do it to someone else? Right? You don't want someone to come into your mother's house when she calls the police because she believes there's an intruder outside, and then shoot her in the head because you have an itchy trigger finger, because you watched Lethal Weapon the nights before, because you want to target practice, right? The reason we could say, well, you shot her because you're racist. Bro, I really don't care why you shot her. You shot her. Yeah. Right? And that seems to be the toughest thing for the American ego. Treat other people the same way you want to be treated.
Facts. And it goes back to when we go back to the historical aspect of it. When you talk about when the little girls in was it 1963? And the white supremacists that bombed the church.
Okay. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so when that hit the news, a lot of people were like, how could this happen? Like, why would someone bomb a church? And you had these little girls in the school, and not in the school, but in the church, and they bombed them. That's the same thing too. And it's like history repeating itself. It's like people like, how could this happen? And then you have other people trying to justify the action, like when it comes to like when you alluded to Sonia Messer, like what did she do to cause that cop to do that to her? You know what I mean? It's not. And if you look at the video, I wrote a poem about it. I put it on the YouTube channel, but it shouldn't get to that point. You know what I mean? It's like, she called the cops because she's, felt like that someone was intruding in her property. You know what I mean? And she should be still alive, but she's not. But it's still a portion of the population of the country that, I wouldn't say justify the act that the cop did, but give him the benefit of the doubt of his action.
And here's the part that baffles me. And this is the part that baffles me. Police officers of the law could have taken any job. You could have been a bus driver. You could have been a teacher. You could have been a convenience store clerk. You could have been a custodian. You could have worked for sanitation. You could have been a lawyer, a doctor. You could have done housekeeping, house cleaning. You could have been a busboy. You could have washed dishes. You could have shined shoes. You could have been anything other than a police officer. You picked a job in which you knew you would be dealing with the worst part of society. You picked a job in which you knew there are people who want you dead because of the badge that you wear. You picked a job that was going to put you in the most high stressful situations. You picked a job in which you knew you would see the worst of human society and kind with some of the most grotesque things possible. You picked the job. You said, I'm qualified. I can handle the stress and the pressure.
Mm-hmm.
So why the hell am I, as a history teacher, sitting here going, well, we need to see your ID for the house? Bro, you work for the police station. You mean to tell me you couldn't call, radio in and go, who lives at this address? Seriously?
Yeah.
You mean you couldn't say at 4217 Peachtree Lane, can we get an ID on who lives here? Okay, what's the name? Okay, yeah, hold on a second. Can you tell me your name? Seriously? You couldn't do that? Because you could run my license plate. You can run my license plate when I'm driving just cause. But you can't call and ask the station, can we get an address, a name for the address? Can we look up who lives here? You mean that's not a thing?
Right. And then the crazy thing about too, bro, is that you can kind of get the access of the background of that person if they have mental issues.
Yeah. And then the other thing too is just looking at that interaction from its entirety. Everything from the beginning said she was off. Yeah. What was required at that moment from the police officer, and this is going to sound crazy, was empathy.
Yeah.
Like, are you okay? Yeah, I'm okay. Yo, she's not okay. Give me 1 second. Hey, dispatch, can I get an ambulance down here? Yeah. Can we find out if ambulance have come to this area before? Can we check has there ever been like a wellness check? You serious?
Yeah.
Because if it was your mother or your sister, you would have wanted the outcome to be different. But it goes back to treat people the way you want to be treated. Right?
Facts. And let's transition, because I know the start of this conversation, we were gonna, because we kind of steered into different conversations and different things. So let's go back to the main conversation we have, right? Biden's out. Harris is in. As a father of two daughters, what does that mean to you, seeing a woman of color being the primarily face of the Democratic ticket as a potential president of the United States?
It means everything.
And the reason why I put it as woman of color, because there's a debate out there. People say, "Well, she's Indian and Jamaican. She's not really." I'm put the point in Europe.
Let me first say this. It means everything, and it means nothing at the same time. I'm going to tell you why.
Okay.
It means everything because to see a woman come that far in America, knowing our history, that speaks volumes, right? And just to put it in perspective, women get the right to vote after they free the slaves, right? Mm-hmm. So, and almost 60 plus years after they free the slaves, women get the right to vote. And I do this with my students all the time, and I'm gonna give it to you. Slaves were considered property. That's like giving your cell phone the car keys before you give your daughter the car keys. Your phone can't drive, right?
Yeah.
But it's your property. Giving your cell phone the car keys before you can give your daughter who's fully capable. Attributing all the attributes of a cell phone to your kid and attributing your kid's attributes to the phone. Like, that's literally the dynamic that we have. So to see her in that position, I'm like, damn, right? Which also really lends itself to the argument. And I need people to stop making this argument. America has changed since the 60s. We have changed since the 50s, since the 20s. We have come a very long way. It is not the same. And when people say that, I'm like, so you sit on the back of the bus? Like, you have to? Because I don't. Nobody does. Right? Like, I don't got to get up when a white person gets something. Like, we have come far. America has changed. It may not have changed as much as you like or want it. It may not have given you everything we've asked for, but don't sit here and pretend that it hasn't given us a lot. Wow. America has changed. So I'm grateful for that. I'm like, she's because of the circumstances in which brought her to, right? Biden had to bow out. And my concern, and not even my concern, if Biden didn't bow out, she wouldn't be here, right? The DNC didn't feel like she was capable of winning before. And the DNC didn't feel like she was capable before. And I said this a lot of times because they knew she couldn't win. The question that remains is America ready for a woman president?
Mm.
From a historical standpoint, I'm going to tell you, the answer to that question is no. Right? Again, I got to go back to our history. Women get the right to vote 60 plus years after we free the slaves.
Right.
We're talking the 1920s.
That's deep. That's deep.
So is America ready for? And a good friend of mine said, well, would it make any difference if she's Republican? No. Nikki Haley didn't get the nod.
Facts.
And I was telling somebody this. I said, we could fight all day. Nikki Haley, I had her ranked above Trump for a presidential candidate from the Republican Party. The problem is she doesn't have a penis. She has a vagina. And because of that, I wasn't picking her. And now to address Kamala Harris, nationality, she's black. I don't know why people are playing this game. Like, they're like, well, there's a video clip of her, and on the subtitles it said first Asian Indian American, and like, so all of a sudden we're gonna play stupid now. Like America didn't have a paper bag test. like Hitler had his, if you have this much blood in you, you are a Jew.
Yes.
Right? America had the exact same test. Plessy versus Ferguson. He was black. He could pass for white in the South, but he was still black because we had the test. All of a sudden, she not black.
No, now, it's crazy. It's crazy, bro. It's crazy, bro, that you brought that up because, I brought up, the 1790 Neutralization Act, right?
Okay.
And you had a Indian man who fought in, I do believe, in World War. Was it World War? It was World War I or II. I don't know.
The date would be wrong. You said 17.
No, 1790 Neutralization Act.
Okay.
But later on, there was a gentleman who of Indian descent who went to court to be defined as Caucasian to get citizenship.
Okay.
And the Supreme Court, like, nah, if you're not white, you're denied citizenship. And so when you talk about that, it's important, again, to have the historical aspect of it, that, again, when we talk about identity politics and who do you think this person is, there's a historical lineage of that. Yes. And it's crazy that as Black people, we use that when it comes to Africans that come to this country, or any person of dark skin, of any African heritage. We kind of use that as to define if they're Black or not Black.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
And yes, and so I mean, for her, by American standards, she's Black. I don't know how. I've never met her, and all these people who have something to say, vast majority have never met her either, and then internet trolls never met her. And so, where she puts herself is where she puts herself, right? I believe she puts herself in the Black category, but the one thing I will throw in here, which this, for my conspiracy theorist people out there, you want to talk about conspiracies and all that other stuff, I think people are about to find out how powerful sororities and fraternities are.
Facts.
Because not only is she Black, not only is she a female, and also I just want to point out, I love the fact that, and this is why I talk about the Democratic Party just getting on my last nerve sometimes. Female, male, there's no female, there's no gender. All of a sudden, we got our first female president. They're gonna have to decide, right? Because this wishy-washy thing, like this gender thing that they're now putting out there, is like, you got to pick one, bro. You can't be there's no gender on Tuesday and then Kamala Harris is now running for president and go, oh, we got a first female. Bro, it's either there's no gender or there is. You got to pick one, right? And I think we are going to find out how powerful sororities and fraternities are. We're going to find out how long their reach is. And we are also going to find out loyalty. Yeah. And it reminds me, and the last thing I'm going to say about it is, and the reason I bring it up is because during World War I and World War II, multiple soldiers recorded in diaries and etc. that when they were on a battlefield fighting, they're getting ready to either shoot an enemy or be shot, or some of them have already been wounded and they're pleading for their lives. And they do a hand signal, similar to like a sorority or a fraternity that they were in. Another soldier on the opposing side recognizes the hand signal and then they shoot their own. Right. So two American soldiers side by side, a German soldier is about to shoot me. I do my hand signal for my secret society, and then the German soldier doesn't shoot me, but shoots another German soldier so I can live. Right. They are about to find out how powerful sororities and fraternities are and loyalty, how far up it goes.
Yes.
And I think even though we may not be ready for America for a female president, I think that is going to be, that might be the secret weapon.
No, and I feel you on that. And I just want to bring more context to what I was alluding to before. Is Stein versus the United States in 1923.
Okay.
Right? This is World War I. All right. But it is contrary to the logic behind its ruling in Oswald versus the U.S. Supreme Court found that Bhagat Singh Thai was also ineligible for citizenship, even though as an Asian Indian who were as Caucasian, he was racially white. And so because of that, he was denied citizenship, even though he was a veteran for World War I. Because he wasn't, even though he was, because again, at that time in 1923, they couldn't define what Caucasian and white is. They're like, hey, if he's not white, he's not a citizen of the United States. Wow. So I want to put that in proper context because that's important to this conversation that we're having. That when you talk about how do you define what is a citizen of the United States? Because I go back to Herbert Hoover, right? Which he had a policy where he deported 1.2 million Mexicans.
Wow.
And 60% of those were American citizens.
Okay.
And again, that posed that question. What do you define American as a citizen? Even though we have laws today, you have the Voting Acts of 1965, and then all the laws that precede that when it comes to the Immigration Act. But again, it goes to that status when people talk about assimilation and what do you define a citizen of the United States?
What you are saying is really interesting because, and I want to say, when was this? It may have been somewhere around like 2009, 2010. The Chinese government started sending its citizens who were pregnant to the United States with the sole purpose of the child to be born here. Being born here makes you a citizen.
Right.
And for just the general public, people, again, because my frustration with the American public sometimes just baffles me. But if you're born in the United States, or if you're born on in the United States territory, military bases around the world, you are considered a U.S. citizen.
Right.
So with the Chinese sending their citizens here to give birth, the child has now dual nationality. You're a U.S. citizen automatically. You're entitled to be protected by the United States Constitution.
Right.
But you're also entitled to be president of the United States.
Right.
because somebody asked this question online. They were like, well, what makes Kamala Harris entitled or qualified to be president? She's over 35. She's a U.S. citizen, and she's lived here for 14 years. Those are the three qualifications to be president. No schooling, no degree, right. Don't have to have a criminal record. You can have a criminal record. You just have to be over 35, live here for 14 years, and be a citizen. That is it.
Right.
So she's qualified. And the reason I bring up the Chinese thing is because people started asking the question: if you're born here and that makes you a citizen, but you're raised in China, and you learn all their customs and all their ways, and then you come here and you live here for 14 years. So if I live in China for 15 years, right, and I come here for 14, am I Chinese or am I American? Where does my loyalty lie? Is my loyalty to the country that I was born in, or the country I was raised in, or the country that I now live in? And the reason that question is so fundamentally sound is because America is playing checkers, but China's playing chess.
Yeah, that's interesting.
We change our president every 4 years, up, in theory. We'll see how that goes in the next couple years. We change. China, Xi has been in there for a couple decades now. He's not planning on leaving. And so the question becomes, is being born here enough? Do you have to live here all of your life? You can't leave, right? Or can you be born somewhere else and then be raised here for a short period of time and be American? Because as an educator, I can tell you, all my parents who come from overseas and the kids who are raised here, you got two very different lifestyles. Those kids become Americanized very quickly.
Yes.
And it's America, everything. They still love their countries and want to go visit sometimes. Some of them don't even want to go back to visit their countries, depending on where they're from. But that's a very good question. Is it enough to be born here to be considered a citizen? Or do you have to live here all of your life? Right?
And that's the reason why I posed that question, is because when you talk about the grandfather clause as the act, right? If your grandfather was a slave, you're a slave, right? That dynamic should applies to American citizens. So when we talk about this immigrant issue, when it comes to people from Mexico, right? Before the United States was the United States, especially in the southwest, that was considered Mexico, right? So when America became America, you had Mexican citizens in the United States. You call it the United States. And then when you start deporting them back to Mexico, my question to you, like you posed that, when you put that in there, is when you talk about the immigration issue, is that their descendants, are they citizens of the United States still? Because their descendants were in the United States before they were deported, even though if you talk about having an imprint in the soil of the United States, if you look at the technicality of it, there are citizens of the United States. But again, you go to the Naturalization Act of 1790, defining who are citizens, defined by race. And so because you're white, you're citizens of the United States. You know what I'm saying? But at the same time, I'm thinking if their descendants are already here, this is the same issue what's going on in Palestine.
And I
think about it.
So I think that it's tough. And I say this because I pose this same question to my students in middle school, and they wrestle with it as well. Again, is being born here enough, right? And if I'm born here, but you take me back someplace else, like deportation, right? Yeah. So you have people who come over here. They're not born here. They come here when they're like 1 or 2 years old. They're not citizens. They don't have their green card. They've been here for 10, 15, 20 years. They then get in legal trouble, get deported. They send them back to wherever country their parents are from. Are they American or are they from that country? They don't know that country, right? They were born, they weren't born here, but they were raised here. Are they American or are they from there, right? And that's a tough question because it's a question our kids are going to have to deal with. It's a question that we're trying to wrestle with now. Because you, like you said, you talked about the border. And just, again, this is another thing that has irked me so much. The vice president does not control the border.
No.
Does not. Vice president has no power over the United States border. None whatsoever. That is a power of Congress to make a law about the border, and that is the power of the president to send the military to protect the border. That also falls on the border states. California, New Mexico, Texas. Mm-hmm. What's the other one? Arizona. That's
Arizona, New Mexico, all those states in that region. Yes.
Yes, it is. Thank you. Okay, I got it in my head. California, Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. Those are the border states. It is up to the governors of those states to either declare national emergency, have National Guard come down there, president or Congress. The vice president is not involved in that. Vice president, they were talking about in the media, they're like, Kamala Harris is the border czar. I don't care if you call her the border queen, border czar, queen of the border. They did like a Game of Thrones of the border and made her sit in the chair. She has no power over the border.
No. None
whatsoever.
The only power that the vice president has is they're the vote if it's a
dividing. Tie. Yes. Deciding vote in the Senate if there's a tie, and they preside over the changing of the president in Congress. That is it. And when they say preside, that literally means you are when they preside over it, you're
the babysitter.
You're the babysitter. Like it's like at a wedding. You're playing the music, but you're not the priest. You're just playing the music. People walk down. That's it. Yeah. You have no special powers. You can't stop it. If you fall asleep, if you're not there, it still goes on. Yes. Right. And again, it's so important for people to know this because people are now bashing her for her record on the border when she doesn't have a record on the border because it's not her thing. Yes. It is not a power of hers. And for all the things that she has done, where she has fallen short and not being perfect, there's no need to lie and add anything on to her mishaps. With that said, we really have to look at the border because if the border is such an issue, California, Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas would handle it. Because they are the ones there first. So when the president said there's a crisis at the border, that's weird because the president wouldn't hear there's a crisis at the border before the governors of the states in which the border states. Like, it doesn't even make any sense.
No, I agree.
Here's my two final points. Yeah, bro. This is why people get on my last nerve once again. Immigration increases the GDP. They like immigrants are taking jobs, black jobs. First off, don't know what a black job is. I'll figure that part out at some point because I own a business, so I'm assuming immigrants are coming into this country and they're becoming CEOs like that. But that's a whole different topic. Immigrants come into the United States and they take jobs nobody wants. Right? And you go, that's not true. You go, yeah, it is. Because name a housing development from New York to California, Georgia, or Florida that's being built where you don't see somebody that's probably Mexican that works there. Find me a construction company that doesn't stop in front of Home Depot and pick up people. Florida, stop playing.
Facts.
Right. And so then you also have immigrants taking jobs that nobody wants. They work in the strawberry, grapes, and orange fields. Yeah. So while we're building machines for AI to suck an apple and throw it in the mirror, they're coming to the fields and they're working for extremely cheap. Farmers need them. because no self-righteous American wants to spend $50,000 to $80,000 to go to community college or go out of state, getting a 3-4 year degree to pick apples. There's a reason why when you walk into a hotel, the Hilton or Motel 6, there's an immigrant probably making your bed when you leave. Taking jobs, they're taking jobs that Americans don't want. The high school kid of the 60s and 50s is no longer trying to get a job bussing tables and working in the back of a hotel or a restaurant. They have their phone and they're trying to be an influencer on social media. Because of SoundCloud, they're trying to be a rapper. Right? And so immigrants are not taking jobs. They're taking jobs that we don't want. And then they are increasing the GDP. People are like, well, there's migrant crime. Migrant crime is not a thing. And the reason migrant crime is not a thing, because first off, how the hell would you track migrant crime? If they're an illegal immigrant and you know where they are, so you mean you're just following them and watching them commit crimes and then you go report it? That's weird. Because if it's migrant crime, you would know that they're here illegally, which means you know where they are. Right? Like that doesn't even make sense. There's no data to support it. The data supports the latter of immigrants who come to this country. They're coming here so they can work because the conditions in their country are so bad that they're willing to take jobs that we Americans would never take just so they can provide for their children, so they can save, so then they can own a convenience store, so they can start a construction company, so they can start a car dealership, so they can own a hotel, so they can send their kid to college, so their kid can be a lawyer, doctor. Like this migrant crime crap, right? And you go, where's it coming from? The media and propaganda. The media takes these small clips of a fight at Times Square, says migrant crime, then runs with it. And then we find out later when you do your homework and research, because we learned this in 7th grade. I know because I teach it to I taught it to my kids in New York. You learn how to vet your sources. And you go, okay, if this news outlet is telling me there's migrant crime, what is the angle and why would they be telling this story if nobody else is? Right? And so we have to do better. And the reason we have to do better because they did a recent poll and they're like almost 60 to 70% Americans are now concerned about migrant crime. What? And I'll tell you, I'll tell you how bad it is. I teach in Georgia. So now at my school, and there's probably a lot of other schools in Georgia that do this, you now can administer Narcan. So you know when a kid ODs, so you can give it to them so they don't OD.
Right.
Anybody, you want to know why that's a thing? Because politicians have been saying kids have been dying of fentanyl. Politicians have been saying that they're giving fentanyl out as candy. Drug dealers are not giving fentanyl out as candy. It's because fentanyl is expensive. This isn't the 80s. We're not giving out free samples of fentanyl, and we're damn sure not giving it to middle schoolers because middle schoolers don't have money. But yet, these politicians have lied so much that teachers can now administer a life-saving drug to a kid who ODs because you lied. But a teacher can't even give a kid a hug because you could sue them or sexual harassment. Like, that doesn't even make sense. I'm not even medically trained for it. Like, what are we talking? I can now diagnose when the kid is ODing off of drugs, but I can't even give a kid like, what world are we living in? And this is what I'm talking about when we look at politics on both sides. Right? And like I said, we have to do better. The lying has to stop. People have to get together, start having conversations. We need to start doing research. We need to start vetting our sources because, again, you learn this when you're in 7th grade. I know because I teach it to my kids all the time. You question the source. If I hate Kamala Harris, why in the world would you come or direct anyone to me if I wrote a book or article about her?
Yeah.
If I hate her and her party, What am I going to say other than I hate her and her party? You vet your sources. Can you get the truth from me? Yes. Are you likely to get the truth from me? No. If I hate Donald Trump and I wrote a book about how much I hate Donald Trump and how much he's a criminal, yeah. Are you likely to get the truth from me? No. Because I'm not a conscientious objector. And this is what's missing in politics. But this is also what's killing us, because we're preying on a huge part of the population that is relying on social media and the news, who's listening to political pundits who are posing as journalists. And then when they get sued, they're backing off and saying, nobody believes me. Right? This can't be America. But it is.
No, and I think it's important too, because it goes back to what I said is when the myth becomes the legend, you print the legend. And this has been, the common theme since, the early days of America, of our independence from Britain. We tell this to our kids, and when they become adults, they tell it to their kids, and it becomes the truth. And the reality, that's the symbol of of our country, and that's not going to go away. To be honest with you, is that if you take away that myth of how the United States was created, then at the end of the day, when you think about it, the foundation doesn't exist.
And I'll add this to it. We leave something out that's extremely important, which I feel like great history teachers don't leave out. Follow the money.
Yeah.
Because when you talk about the creation of this country, follow the money. The 13 colonies were the least taxed of all the colonies. So the question then becomes, if we were the least taxed, why would we care about taxes? And then we go, the same ideology then that plagued us then is the same one that plagues us now.
Yeah.
The 99 follow the 1%. The 99 go to war for the 1%. And then when we become free, the 1% screw over the 99. And we fast forward today, the people now are fighting amongst themselves. Like, people are literally fighting over Biden and Trump, and now over Harris and Trump. People who know each other very well, people who probably sat at each other's homes, had dinner, laughed, joked, hung out, had the best of times, now look at each other with vitriol. And they are at each other's necks for two candidates that are not going to show up at their funerals. For two candidates that are not helping them pay college tuition. For two candidates that are not helping them get great health care. For two candidates that, if they ever get cancer, are not going to come visit them in the hospital. Two candidates that they will never meet. How is that even possible? Right? But I wanted to say this. The vice president is super important. We've seen it over time. And this is one of those cases, because Biden stepping down, and by the way, when I was clapping that he was stepping down, I was happy that he stepped down, because he should have never ran for president the first time. His ego put him in office. Joe Biden's ego put him in office the first time. He saw an opportunity to go against Trump. He knew, just like everyone else in this country knew, if it was a shoebox versus Donald Trump, a box of cereal, if it was a phone cord, if it was a phone case versus Donald Trump, people were going to vote for that phone case. That's where we were at the country. People were so upset, right? And he saw his opportunity to do what he tried to do a long time ago, not for the good of the people, for his ego. And he came in. So him stepping down for me was a great thing, because I always tell this to people all the time. No one liked Biden. They just didn't like Trump. You had two options. They just didn't like Trump. Right. And now we have Harris. who Trump is now the old man in office.
Yeah.
He's the old man. He's the one that we have to worry about having a heart attack. He's the one that we have to worry about his cognitive ability, because in a battle of wits, he's not matching with Kamala Harris. He's just old.
Yeah.
And his performance for each, not debate, but for each rally he has is getting worse because he just sits there and rants like an old man would do. Only problem was he has so much more vitality compared to Biden.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And now that Biden's not there, you're like, oh, wait a minute, he really is that old. And the reason the VP is so important who you pick, because for Trump, he has JD Vance. JD Vance literally hates Donald Trump. Anyone who says otherwise is lying. The videos are out there. He hates Donald Trump. You don't hate someone like JD Vance hates Trump and then turn around and go, I love you. It's not a thing.
Mm-mm.
He genuinely hates him. And the reason this is so important is because when it comes time for JD Vance to protect his butt, he's going to turn on Trump.
Yeah.
He's going to turn on him and he's going to sell him up the river. Because as much as JD Vance is kissing Trump's butt now, JD knows presidential immunity does not extend to the VP.
Nope.
And with that said, for Harris, she needs to now pick a VP that can help her win states that she probably can't win.
And I agree with you 100% with that, bro. I think the reality, it has to be a white male, someone from those battleground states, just to have a chance to win those states. Because again, like we were talking about off air, is that, the battleground states are Minnesota, Michigan, Arizona, Pennsylvania, like the normal battleground states.
Yeah.
And she has to pick a VP from one of those states just to, have someone that resonates. Because again, she doesn't want to lose those the elderly vote, because the elderly, they're gonna vote and they're gonna vote big. And so you don't want to alienate them. So you want to find that medium range where they a candidate that resonate with them, but also resonate with that population. But go ahead, bro.
First off, this is what I was saying. This is a horrible pick, but this is a pick I would love to see.
Okay.
Stacey Abrams, and I'm gonna tell you why I would like Stacey Abrams. And I'm gonna tell you why. She knows how to talk to people. She knows how to talk to people, but she also has something that historically works in her favor. If you go back to the 1960s, we go back to the 70s, 60s, 50s, 40s. The midwives that took care of a lot of these people, kids,
right?
Stacey Abrams resembles a lot of them. That black motherly figure,
right?
The same thing that pushed Oprah right over the top. Stacey Abrams has a look, and she has the charisma,
right?
And she's non-threatening.
Okay.
But I agree with you 100%. It'll be very interesting to see where they go. But when we talk about the VP, here's why the VP is so important. JFK's assassination.
Yes.
When JFK gets assassinated, Lyndon B. Johnson, LBJ, becomes president. LBJ was a good old Southern boy. He loved to say the N-word. When JFK died, nobody thought Lyndon B. Johnson will fulfill JFK's legacy. When Kennedy died, they thought the Civil Rights Movement, the Civil Rights Act, voting rights died with him. When Lyndon B. Johnson becomes president, for whatever reason, he then fulfills JFK. I personally believe he may have had a meeting with JFK's wife at some point. And I think Kennedy's wife may have told him, like, give him this one thing. I also think that the assassination of Kennedy turned Congress into, we were not going to help civil rights. We were not going to do this vote. We weren't going to do anything. But because you took one of ours, we'll give him this on a sympathy move. But for whatever reason, Lyndon B. Johnson passes the civil rights legislation, and as a result of him passing it, he forever switches the Democratic and Republican parties. This is something that the American public needs to know. This is something that someone like Ben Shapiro, he knows this.
Yes.
The Southern Democrats get so upset with Lyndon B. Johnson. They walk their racist ass. They walk their racist asses right across the aisle to the Republican Party. And the Republicans go, "Ill, Southern Democrats, you disgust me." They get up and they walk their asses right over to the Democratic Party.
Facts. And I think one of the things that Lyndon B. Johnson said when he signed it, he said the Democrat has lost the South for decades.
Bingo. No. But remember, when he says he lost the South for decades, he's referring to the racist part of the South.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
And what happens then is almost every black person in the country votes Democratic. And the reason this is significant is because, again, when we look at our history, at the end of the Civil War, when we go 1865, 1866, 1867, when they institute the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment, and blacks now take office for the first time throughout the South and around the country, their white counterparts start to go in two categories. They go, "Oh, snap, these blacks are not as ignorant and dumb and lazy as they said." And then the other ones go, "We got to get them the hell out of here." Because then they learn that in order to win any election after the Civil War, you needed the black vote.
Yes.
And so when they realized you needed the black vote, it was either we let them vote and we never get into office if we're racist. We steal an election like we did throughout the entire South after Reconstruction and so on, or we just kill them. Yeah. Right? And when we have the only coup d'etat in Carolina, we kill them. We know this to be true. We know that they kill the black legislators, run them out of town, destroy homes, and then replace them with an all-white racist government. We know this, and we never stop to go, "Nah, y'all all got to go, and we got to have a different election." And these are the terms, right? And so when the parties switch, black people go to the Democratic side. And then people say stuff like, well, what did they do for us? They gave you voting rights when no one wanted to give you rights at all. And you go, that's it? Yeah, that's pretty much it. Because the history of this country warranted us to go, thank you for the voting rights. At least that's something. Was it everything we asked for? No. And so it brings us to this point where your VP is very important, because in the event that the president becomes incapacitated, and now with the assassination attempt on Donald Trump, it's highly likely that if Kamala Harris takes office, there's going to be more shots that ring out.
Yeah, facts. And it is eerie feeling that I go back in 1989, Gerald Ford, former President Gerald Ford, was posed a question by a little girl, and the little girl posed a question to him and said, "When will we ever see the first woman president?" Right? And Gerald Ford said, and I can't believe he kind of predicted it. It's like the only way you're going to see a woman president is if she's a vice president, and if the president soon, let's say, eventually something happens to him, she becomes president. And if she becomes president, eventually that will become the norm. And that's the only time you'll see the first woman president. And we go back to now, 2020, you look at now, Biden down. Kamala is the face of the Democratic Party. There's a possibility she may be the first woman president. And for Gerald Ford to say that in 1989, that tells everything you were talking about earlier.
But again, Gerald Ford knows what I know, what every historian in the country knows. He knows America's not ready for a woman president. And when Hillary ran, I had conversation with friends and I said, Hillary doesn't stand the chance. And people said, don't say that, don't say that. And I was like, I'm not wishing her ill will. I'm telling you, people are not going to vote for her. And they're going to say the stereotypical thing of she's a woman. She's going to get all emotional. She might get on social media and start crying. And I'm like, oh, so she might have Twitter fingers. She might rant on Twitter. Yeah, you mean like our former president, right? Like crying on social media, like that's what you thought, right? And they're like, oh, she might start a war. You mean like every war that was started by a male president? Like, what are you talking about? Yeah. Right? But for as progressive as America has become, again, has America come a long way? Yes. For Black people, for white people, has America changed? Absolutely. Are there a lot of people that still believe women belong in the kitchen? Yes. There's a lot of people who still believe women belong in the kitchen, yeah, and that their sole purpose is to have babies and nothing more. Yeah. And those people are still voting, yeah, right? And so it's people need to realize that, yeah, a man can cook too. Yeah. A woman can cook too. A man can raise children. A woman can raise. Hell, it's so weird that one political party that believes so strong in marriage doesn't realize men can raise children. Yeah, it's the weirdest phenomenon. But what's going to be interesting to see again is, are women going to turn out for her to vote?
I would say white woman. Because again, this is similar to 2016, where white women come out to vote Kamala, or they're like, I feel uncomfortable seeing a woman of color in charge, and that's one thing no one's talking about in the media.
No, but don't forget. Remember that paper bag test?
Yes.
The reason that paper bag test was so important. I got to bring up Plessy versus Ferguson.
Yes.
Plessy versus Ferguson was so important because the underlying principle was, just like during slavery, he was light enough to pass for white. He was easy on the eyes of the Southerners. And if we look at him really quick, not a glance, but like a real, or we pause for a second and look away, yeah, he appears white from a distance. And so for her, she's not as dark as a lot of people might fear.
Yes.
And for some people, that might play well and fair for her. She can walk into just about any restaurant or establishment in the South and not draw too much attention. And that might work in her favor. But like I said before, will race hold some people back? Absolutely. Will it push some people forward? Absolutely. In this particular race, I think it is extremely, extremely, extremely important for people to do two things: research,
yes,
and then two, vet your sources. As an adult, if someone from the far right or far left writes an article about a candidate, there is no need for you to read it. If there's a news outlet, CNN, Fox, or any other, where the political pundits or news reporters have only bashed, every time you tune in, they are bashing. Like there was a reporter who said something like, Kamala Harris hawk-tuied her way to the top. And you're like, wow, that's really interesting choice of words. Right. And it's also weird that you've never said that about Biden, Trump, Obama, Ford, Reagan, Nixon. She's the one that hawk-tuied. Yeah. No one said Ted Cruz hawk-tuied his way to the top. Right? And so people need to start asking those questions. Why am I falling for the media's narrative? Right? Because the only thing that has changed as far as politics in the last couple of years is the way the media is portraying people. Yeah. And we've already seen with the last election where Fox had to pay Dominion like $800 million.
Mm-hmm.
And Dominion let them off really easy.
Yeah. No, and I think it's an interesting dynamic when you talk about the media. Because when I think about the media, I think of Franklin D. Roosevelt, right?
Mm-hmm.
In this current media that we live in today, the story of Franklin D. Roosevelt would be a lot different. You know what I mean? Would be
Sorry,
where
sorry, 1 second.
I think the dog is interested into the politics. Oh, can you hear me? Everything good? You know, Frank- you know, Franklin D. Roosevelt had a disease where he was in a wheelchair, right?
Mm-hmm.
And let's say the media back then highlighted that, like they did with Biden. And so it's crazy how the way the media has covered the president now than it did back in the days.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? At the same thing with if you think about Kennedy and his mistress on the side.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like in today's media, Kennedy would not survive as a president with all the scandals he dealt with when he was president.
Mm-hmm.
And if that was highlighted today.
But I also think that to a certain degree, if Kennedy was president now and he had mistresses, I think a lot of people lay off and they would hit him with everybody makes mistakes.
Mm,
I think if it was Obama, they would set his house on fire.
facts.
They would put every picture up, right? But again, I said every Republicans and Democrats have their news stations that slight in favor. But the one thing that remains consistent, if they look like us, we can't shame them too bad. We can't drag them too bad, right? And even with Biden, as much as we talked about of sleepy Biden and all those things, he still looks like their grandfather.
Yeah.
Right. And so now that Biden is not in the spotlight, the rhetoric is going to stop. There's no more attacking him because it was never personable about Biden. We just wanted you out of the office so we could get our guy in.
Mm-hmm.
We were going to say and do anything. And that kind of politics has no place in the United States.
No,
Right?
yeah.
And
Yep.
you have this, this violent rhetoric where if you look at the last 3 years
Mm-hmm.
and you look at candidates running in the South,
Mm-hmm.
how many of them had guns in their hand and they were like, blah, 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 blah. And they shot a garbage can, a TV. Is like, are you running for office?
Yeah.
Or you're telling us that you're going to kill, because there's no need for you to shoot a TV.
Right.
There's no, okay, so you got an AK. Are you telling me not to rob your house or are you telling me you're going to rob mine? There's no need for it.
Yeah.
Right. But that kind of political rhetoric only further fuels the narrative, which then goes back to when I talked about the Trump assassination. He fit the mold, the assassin or would-be assassin fit the mold of a shooter.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't see his face plastered all over. This man attempted to kill a former president.
Yes.
It should be the talk of the town. Everyone needs to be, we need to dial it back.
Yeah.
But I also remember when Nancy Pelosi wasn't home and an intruder broke in and tied up her husband and hit him in the head with a hammer. That's on body camera.
Yeah.
And now he's facing 30, and I think he got sentenced to 30 years. And people were laughing and joking, and you go, that's not funny. Because I can't think of a time where, growing up, where a sitting senator or member of Congress or a member of the Supreme Court had someone break into their home
Mm-hmm.
not because they were mad at the policies, but because the media was fueling this violent narrative.
Yeah.
Right. And when we talked about the legend of of America, what makes America great? And it's interesting because Donald's slogan is Make America Great Again. And I always tell people that's a great slogan. I really would just like for him to tell me the date.
Yeah.
Like if he can tell me the date America was great again, I'd vote for him, hands down. Tell me when America was great so I can look at what was going on that you're trying to restore for this country. Right? But that legend of America, that legend of America when America was made, one of the key elements was the transition of power, of peaceful power. The fact that George Washington, again, can't stress this enough, owned more slaves than anybody else, raped his slaves, and he stepped down from the presidency. A slave master and rapist said, "This is too much power. I'm going to go back. I'm going to go do something else.
I'm gonna own more slaves and rape more slaves. I don't want to be no
I don't
more.
want to be president, right?" And the King of England is like, that man has all that power and he just gave it up.
Yeah.
And now we possibly have somebody who's trying to get into the White House who doesn't want to give up power.
Yeah.
And you go, what? They're like, we're the party of Lincoln. Lincoln stepped down from office. And the fun fact about Lincoln, even Lincoln had to break every law that you could possibly break just to get the 13th Amendment ratified, just to end the debate on slavery once and for all. And so when we look at our history, like, we're the party of Lincoln. No, you're the party of Lincoln in name, because Lincoln stepped down. Or in Lincoln's case, Lincoln was assassinated. But Lincoln stepped up because the power was transferred over to him. And the crazy part, we're the party of Lincoln. Even Lincoln notoriously after the war said, let them go. Let the Confederates go. We're still brothers.
Yeah.
We're still brothers from a different aisle, different sides. We don't want any retribution. We don't want any punishment. Right. Let's figure this country out. This war was unnecessary. We won the war. No need to penalize.
Yeah.
He embraced the other side. He was like, yo, let's just figure this out. So when we say we're the party of Lincoln, in name only, not in character.
No.
And so.
No, I think that's the perfect way to end it, is that, being assigned to a party is you signed to a party, but are you signed to their character?
I like that.
I think that's the most important thing. Is like when you decide who you're going to vote for, I'm not telling you who to vote for, who you want to vote for, but at the end of the day, you have to do some self-reflection. It's like, does this person reflect, or this party reflect my character? Or if you're willing to surpass that, because you feel like you have a self-interest and you think something's going to get done that's going to benefit you. Like people say, do you, boo? That's all you do, what you want to do. You know what I mean? But I think that's the most important thing from this conversation, is that when you decide, do as much research as you can, especially when you talk about candidates, but also do research on the history of it too, because it ties into what we're dealing with today.
Yes, and for the love of God, know the powers of the presidential office, the executive branch, legislative, judicial. Know the powers. Is what I really want to end it off with. But then I'm also like, president can't be arrested, so there really is no need to know the powers, because the president can now do whatever he or she wants in office. So I tell people, if a president does not get their agenda done after the Supreme Court made that decision, then you have to vote them out, because there's no reason that a president can't get anything done now. Absolutely no reason. Congress is not standing in their way, and the Supreme Court damn sure is not standing in their way.
Right. And the only way is if you get the trifecta, where you have a president and the Congress under the same party.
And you don't need, again, president can't be arrested. You don't even need Congress.
No, you don't need Congress, but it just helps to have
It
the
looks
same
good.
affiliate. It looks good on a bumper sticker.
Yep, it looks good in bumper stickers. That's it.
But bro, thank you for coming on, man. This has been a great conversation. How
Thanks for
can
having me.
people find you, man? How people can find you?
You can find me at Serious Prince Publishing on all social media platforms, and people can reach out. I'm always available. Let me not say always, because that's kind of weird.
You're a CEO, man. You're a CEO of a publishing company. It's hard for
Yes,
people.
I got office hours, but
Big
yeah,
Red. He's Big
yes,
Red.
big red. Yes, that's right. 9 to 5, right? But yeah, all social media handles, Serious Prince Publishing, principals, schools, anyone reach out and we can talk. But and the last thing I want to say too, that's why this book series is so important, because it tackles a lot of today's political climate and things that are going on in a fictitious way. But as always, revolution is in the hands of the youth. And so this younger generation coming up is far more politically astute and equipped to tackle a lot of the problems that we ourselves just won't tackle.
Yeah.
And so I tell people this all the time. I give credit to Obama for getting a lot of young people for tuning into politics, but I give unlimited credit to Donald Trump because he keeps them tuned in, because they cannot take their eyes off of him for good or bad. They're watching absolutely everything, and they look at everything and they go back and go, wait, can he do this? Is this part of the Constitution? What are we? And so this younger generation is so in tune with politics today. Mm-hmm. And so I'd love to see it. And I think their biggest challenge now, because of AI, is vetting their sources and determining if something is actually real or not.
Facts. And I agree with that, man. And this has been another great conversation here on the podcast. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And we're out. Peace. All right, end the recording right now.